guys, how's it going? My name is Jason Sari. I'm a financial advisor with the Premier Client Group. On the side, I run this YouTube page and a Facebook group called Financial Education for Retirement, just to help foster financial education to anybody I can reach. But let's get into the video today on turning hundreds into millions starting as a teen. Now, you guys might be wondering, why in the world would I start planning for retirement as a teen? Now, you can't start too early to plan for retirement. If you're 15, 16, 14, just started working, whatever it might be, you're going to thank yourself later on the earlier you start planning. But just for what's going to be covered in this video today, we'll start off with the different types of accounts you can invest with: brokerage accounts, traditional and Roth IRAs, 401ks, TSP, and 403bs. Then we'll go into the power of compounding interest, how important it is to start as early as you possibly can. Then we'll translate into ETFs or mutual funds, what makes more sense for a teen. Insurance, while 99% of you probably don't need it, the 1% of you that might, we'll go over what insurance makes sense for you or what insurance you might be able to get the most out of. And then we'll kind of end it off with an emergency fund and a lifetime savings, just a lifeline for you to go back to if you ever need it, if something ever goes wrong in your life. So the easiest place to start is probably brokerage accounts. Brokerage accounts are probably what you're most familiar with. You can open one up through Schwab, Fidelity, Robinhood, Webull, Acorns. The account you're trading in those platforms is usually a brokerage account, an account that when you buy and sell stocks, you are taxed, which there's nothing wrong with it. You have to get taxed a lot of instances in life, and a brokerage account is a really good place to start for most people. So again, a brokerage account is not a retirement specified account. You can use it to save for retirement, but retirement accounts usually trade tax-free. Brokerage accounts do not. You have to pay short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains on stocks when you sell them. Now, the only difference between short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains is the tax rate. And if you hold a stock for less than a year, it gets taxed at the short-term capital gains tax rate, which is your ordinary income tax rate. If you get taxed long-term capital gains, that's if you've held a stock for a year or more, and that's at a lower tax rate, sometimes even zero if you don't make that much money. But as far as brokerage accounts goes, you can buy mutual funds, ETF, stocks, bonds, pretty much anything you can think of. And that's where you put money away, and that's where you trade those different securities. You can do the same thing in other accounts, but once again, a brokerage is probably the most common. You might open one up the day you turn 18. You could open up before you have any earned income. You could open one up with your parent the second you are born as a custodial account. Brokerage accounts are very, very useful in the sense they have no limits. You can contribute as much as you'd like to them per year. And although they are taxed, that contribution rate really allows you to save as much as humanly possible. So you have to take that into account when looking at this particular savings vessel. Now, something you've probably heard a million times is an IRA. An IRA is the most popular type of retirement account, and some argue it is the best retirement account by far. Now, they have two versions of IRAs, a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA. The difference between these is how the money is put in on the way in and how it comes out tax-free or taxed on the way out. Now, with a Roth IRA, that is a post-tax account. That means when you put the money in to the account, it is post-tax. You are already taxed on that money. So at retirement, when you take it out, the money is not taxed. However, with a traditional IRA, you put the money in before it gets taxed. You take a deduction, the money goes into the IRA, tax-free. Then at retirement, you are taxed on the money when you pull it out of the traditional IRA. The way to choose a Roth or a traditional IRA is a simple mathematical calculation having to do with the tax rate you are in currently versus the tax rate you expect to be in at retirement. So for a young worker, a teen, a low income worker, whatever it might be, when you're not making a lot of money, you're in a low tax rate. At retirement, you're going to have things like Social Security. You're going to have a pension, maybe distributions from a 401k or an IRA or whatever it might be, and that would increase your income. So although you might think, how in the world, when I'm retired and not employed, will I be making more money than I am now as an employed individual? There's other things that you're going to have to take into account that will create income for you even if you don't have a job. So again, if your tax rate is lower now than it will be at retirement, it makes sense to get taxed on that money, put it in now, then take it out of retirement tax free. Now, vice versa is the traditional IRA. With a traditional IRA, since that money is going in pre-tax, you are not getting taxed at that money if you have a higher tax rate currently than you will be in at retirement. So again, if you're at a higher tax rate now than you will be at retirement, you want to take that deduction. And then when you're in retirement, you get taxed at the lower tax rate when you're taking distributions from the traditional IRA. However, there is another argument that Some people just want the mental sanity knowing that they're not going to be taxed on their money when they take it out of retirement. Even if they're in a high income tax bracket, they might just contribute to a Roth and call it a day, even if it actuarially doesn't make sense. So that's an argument in itself. That's more of a personal preference than a mathematical calculation, but it is something to keep in the back of your head. Just if you do like that tax free income mindset. With these retirement accounts, though, there are limitations. As far as a Roth goes, you do have limits you can contribute to. If you make over a certain amount a year, you can't contribute to a Roth IRA. A traditional IRA has no phase out, but a Roth does. So that's something you also have to keep in mind. You don't want to get penalized by contributing to a Roth if you can't. The IRS has a limit. I'll put it up in this corner, but if you make over that amount a year, you cannot contribute for the year 2025. The other limit is the $7,000 limit. For the year 2025, you can contribute $7,000 or 100% of earned income, whatever's less. Earned income is money from a job. It's not money from a pension. It's not money your parents gave you. It's money from a job. So if you make $3,000 one year, you can't contribute $7,000 to an IRA. You can only contribute $3,000 of that earned working income. So the $7,000 limit is way different than a brokerage account, which has unlimited limits. But with that comes a little bit of a benefit. You can trade tax free. When you sell a stock, a mutual fund, an ETF, whatever it might be, in an IRA, you don't get taxed when you sell. So you could trade a million times in one year and just never get taxed, which is a huge benefit to these types of accounts. As far as that $7,000 limit goes, it does get adjusted for inflation. So it might be 8,000 when you're 20, it might be 10,000 when you're 30. Who knows what it's going to be? But there also is a $1,000 per year catch up once you turn to age 50. If you're planning as a teen, that catch up means nothing to you. But if you're over 50 years old and watching this, you get an additional $1,000 that you can contribute to an IRA for the year 2025. So it's an $8,000 limit, not a $7,000 limit if you are over the age of 50. As far as what you can buy in an IRA, it's almost identical to what you can buy in a brokerage account. It's extremely flexible, which is a huge benefit to these types of accounts because most retirement accounts don't have investment flexibility, such as the 401k, which we'll get into next. With a 401k, it is an employer sponsored plan. An IRA you open by yourself, so it's an individual sponsored plan. But a 401k you open completely through an employer. Therefore, you are limited to the options that the employer or the plan provides you. As a teen, you might not see a 401k, a 403b, or a TSP a lot, but if you have a job that offers it, you need to be aware of it because these plans are unique in the sense that they offer matches. A match is an amount that your employer will completely provide on their own in addition to your contribution. So sometimes they'll match up to a certain percent of your contribution, and you really want to make sure you're taking advantage of that match if you can afford to. With these plans, you can also trade tax free. Although you're held to the investments that the plan provides, you can trade them as many times as you like and you would never get taxed due to the fact that this is a retirement account. Another thing to look out for with 401ks is that they do have a Roth and a traditional version, just like the IRA. Now, back to the whole tax thing, do what's right for you as far as your tax bracket now and your tax bracket you expect to be in retirement. But the Roth and traditional options for a 401k are relatively new. So it's definitely something to look into when you're electing to be in one of these plans. Now, guys, these plans do have limitations. Because they're retirement accounts, there are certain restrictions. Look into my other videos to really figure out what the restrictions are as far as age limits go, contributions limits go, how much you can contribute to a 401k if you need a revision on how much you can contribute to an IRA. Again, go look at those videos. There's some pretty in-depth ideas that I go into as far as the concrete differences and how to make a decision based on what's best for you. Now, though, let's get into the cool stuff, the compounding interest, how your hundreds actually turns into millions. So, as you guys have probably heard of before, the S&P 500, which is the largest 500 stocks in the US economy. This has an average return of 7 to 10%. I think the average return over the last 20 years is 9.5%. So we'll use the 9.5% as a compounding interest rate for these next couple equations. So for this example, we are going to be using a Roth IRA as the vessel you are trading in. So there's no tax when you trade. The money goes in post-tax, and then you take it out tax-free. So let's say you open a Roth IRA when you start working at age 13. Approximately, you're going to retire at 65, so in 52 years. So over those 52 years, if you put in $100 at the beginning of every month and get 9.5% interest, which the S&P 500 averages as a return, you would end up with $1.731 million when you are retired. Now, this is only $62,000 of principal, but it's worth 1.731 million because of that 9.5% interest rate. That is a huge number compared to the $62,000 you would have saved if you didn't invest it. This concept is make or break, guys. You could save your whole entire lifetime and be nowhere close to being able to retire just because you didn't take advantage of the tools around you. Making sure you invest, making sure you get the most out of your money is how you have a successful retirement, is how you become a millionaire. It's not working and working and working and working. That's part of it. But if you just invest and if you just save strategically, you will be a millionaire with minimal amount of money put away. An even more fun calculation is what would happen if you maxed out your Roth every single year since you were 13 all the way until retirement. So check this example out. If you put away $7,000 a year, the max you can contribute to a Roth IRA for 52 years from 13 to 65, starting out with $0, getting a 9.5% interest rate, you would almost have $9 million in your retirement account when you retire. It's actually absurd that if you just consistently save and consistently invest, you'll almost have $10 million at retirement from just consistently maxing out a Roth IRA. Stop trying to do real estate as a kid. Sometimes that doesn't make sense. Just put money away, wait till you have a little extra money, and then use real estate. But make sure you consistently save, consistently get that return, and just make sure you're taking advantage of every single opportunity you can. The next question is, how do you get this 9.5% return? Like I mentioned before, the S&P 500, a common index in the US stock market, has an average return of 9.5% over the last 20 years. So, how do you buy this index? Well, there's a couple very common things that people look into that help them mirror an index. One is a mutual fund, and one is an ETF. So, what's the difference between an ETF and a mutual fund? Well, an ETF is a very passive strategy. An ETF strives to match an index. So if you buy an S&P 500 ETF, it's just trying to match the S&P 500, its gains and losses, no more, no less. Well, a mutual fund can try to match match an index, or they can try to beat the index. Now, the ones that don't try to beat the index, they're called passive, while an actively managed mutual fund tries to consistently beat the index that it's trying to match. So an actively managed mutual fund is going to cost more in fees, by the same token that it's trying to beat the index that you're copying. The thing with mutual funds, however, is they're not guaranteed to beat the index. If they're actively managed, they can still underperform the index they're trying to match, which is a very odd thing. You have to really look into these mutual funds. You have to vet them out. You might need to talk to a professional before even buying a mutual fund. While an ETF is a much easier strategy to attack because you're just buying something that's matching an index, low cost, low fee, nothing really hidden. While a mutual fund is going to have higher fees, there might be hidden fees in and out, and it's not guaranteed to even match the index. It can sometimes miss the index, and the performance, if you find a really good one, could be worth a mutual fund. But a lot of the time, those managers aren't going to beat the S&P 500 or whatever index it is you're looking for. Moral of the story between these two different options, the ETF and the mutual fund, if you're trying to go crazy and maybe trying to beat the S&P 500, maybe look into a really good mutual fund. But if you're just trying to get your 9.5% per year and get to that 1.7 million mark, that 9 million mark, whatever you're striving to achieve, just go with an ETF. They're simpler if you're investing by yourself, they're easier to understand, and they have lower costs. But that's just my opinion. It's not advice whatsoever. Definitely reach out to a financial professional to see what actually makes the most sense for you. Next on the agenda, I'm going to talk about life insurance very, very lightly. If you're a kid, if you're a teen, there's like a 99% chance you do not need life insurance. But the 1% chance that you might, I might as well go over to give you guys a little bit of a ballpark on what to look for. So, what I mean when I say 99% of you aren't going to need life insurance, as a teen, nobody really depends on you. If your parents depend on you a little bit, you might be in this 1%. But the purpose of life insurance is to take care of those that depend on you after you pass away, whether it be your family or certain heirs. If you pass away and you were a big part of their income stream and they would struggle without you, that is when you look for life insurance. If you are really looking into life insurance as a teen and you are addicted to it, well, for whatever reason, there's two different types, two different main types, term and whole life. Now, a term life policy is a policy that expires after a certain amount of years, while a whole life typically does not expire. Another difference between these two is term life does not have a cash value, while whole life does have a cash value. So if you pay in a term life your whole entire life, or however long that term is, it's usually 5, 10, and 15 years, If you pay into that term life, it's going to expire and it's going to expire worthless. Well, if you pay into a whole life, over time, you're going to build a cash value in that policy. Now, sometimes you can invest the money in that whole life policy. It's called a variable whole life policy. And you can invest it in whatever you want or whatever the plan provides. And if that money goes down, your death benefit is typically reduced, but it's something that can provide a little bit of an inflationary hedge as well as increasing your cash value. Again, most of this stuff is going to be over a teen's head. If you do need it, you might as well know a little bit about it. But if you're looking for life insurance as a teen, the cash value might be able to help you later on because you can also take loans from the cash value as well as invest it in certain types of accounts. Lastly, I'd like to go over what an emergency fund is and how much you should have in your emergency fund. Now, an emergency fund is basically a lifeline of cash that if something were to go wrong in your life, you could afford. You get fired from a job, you have a couple months saved up, but 3 to 6 months of fixed and variable expenses is usually what should be in an emergency fund, and it should be in cash, a savings account, or a checking account. There's other accounts like money market accounts and a few others that count as liquid for emergency funds, but it's safe to say they should be in a very close cash substitute, if not cash itself. It's important to have a safety net before you start investing because, like I said, with retirement accounts, there are restrictions, and with brokerage account, there is tax. So, if you need a certain dollar amount, you might need to oversell or you might need to take penalties depending on what type of account you're in. So, you want that safety net, you want that backup fund just to make sure that you don't have to deal with tax or unnecessary penalties. That's it for the video today, guys. I hope you got something out of this. I know there was a lot of information included, but just pick up a couple things here and there. If you need to go more into the weeds, watch the video again, or I have separate videos on the different accounts and different things you can do in those accounts just to make sure you're taking full advantage. Definitely check those out if you want a little more education. Otherwise, again, I hope you learned how important it is to start saving early and often. And again, if you have any questions, check out the Facebook group Financial Education for Retirement. It's a fantastic group with financial planners as members, willing to answer any questions you guys might have. But hope you guys have a good rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the videos on the page.